Welcome to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show with me, Brenda Hector. I'm a business growth specialist, helping business owners to develop themselves and grow their businesses so they can achieve their goals and enjoy the lifestyle they dream of. I'm on a mission to revolutionise the entrepreneurial landscape for women in business. In every episode, I interview someone who has an inspiring story or some great advice for women aiming to start or scale their businesses. If you're new to the show, take a moment to subscribe right now so you don't miss any upcoming episodes, and please check out the previous ones after listening to this. We have an awesome Facebook community. Just search for Scale Her Up and join in. Welcome to the Business Spotlight and Scale Her Up. I'm Brenda Hector, and I've got Margaret Brown of Margaret Brown Consulting with me today. Thanks for joining me, Margaret.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me.
No, I think you've got a great story, so it'll be great to share with the viewers and listeners. So yeah, you're a consultant. What type of consulting do you do?
I specialize in leadership coaching. So first of all, working with leaders to understand the challenges that they are facing, what their pain points are, how to get the best out of their business and the best out of their team members. And so there's a lot of consultation in the early stages, and then we just design some form of bespoke coaching and training to address those objectives and challenges.
So to somebody listening, here we go. There's a pair of coaches talking about the fluffy stuff. So what?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, it's ironic that I think that traditionally what we talk about are known as soft skills, but they're actually the hardest to implement, because when you're talking about leadership, you're dealing with people and their opinions and their beliefs and their personal agendas, their diversity, their backgrounds and everything. And those are very, very difficult to measure. So therefore, they're the hardest to create any kind of policies or procedures around, because we don't fit in nicely into these little boxes. So it's one of the hardest things to do. So when I talk about soft skills, it's very much in inverted commas. But they absolutely are the differentiator. I do, but when I work with any client, I take it as a given that they know how to run their business. They know about the legal aspects. They know about the financial, budgetary aspects, regulatory aspects. They know how to do their business, whether that's making cupcakes or drilling for oil or making cars. It doesn't really make any difference, because the people are the differentiator. So I think in most cases, clients all have access to similar infrastructures, similar hardware. And so why is it that some of them do so well and some of them don't do so well? And I fundamentally believe that that's all about leadership and getting the best out of people, making them feel valued, developing them to their full potential, listening to them most importantly. And then people are just more productive. And if people are happy, and enjoy what they do, and they feel valued and that they're doing something important, they deliver their best work. And that's what it really boils down to, but it's not easy. So hence, they're not really soft skills, they're quite hard. They're hard to do.
Taking a little bit further as well, when they're doing their best work, the business is making the most profit. I mean,
exactly.
It's all about there is a return that you get from getting.
And it is measurable. I mean, one of the first questions I'm asked is, how do you measure the soft stuff? And to a degree, it's a leap of faith, because, and I do say this to my clients, once you set the expectation with employees that you're going to really make things as good as you can for them, the genie's out the bottle and you can't put it back. They have to know that they're being listened to. And so they say, how do you measure it? And I say, well, it is a bit of a leap of faith. But if you take a step into the future, say 6 months down the line from now, has your absenteeism dropped? Has attrition dropped? Are you gaining and retaining more customers? And which is attributable as well to happy employees, because they deliver better service. So it's a virtuous circle. So to an extent, it's a leap of faith, but I'm also confident enough to say to them, if you really do get on board with this and you trust me and we work together, we collaborate, we work in an alliance, you will get that return in forms of drops in absenteeism. And as an example, I did work with one client in the energy sector around 2004 to 2008. When I first started working with them, their staff turnover was around 12%. And within that, and it does take a while to embed this, by the way, particularly in a bigger company. By the time we finished, their staff turnover was 0.6%. And they were listed at number 11 in the Sunday Times Top 100 Companies to Work For. So that was a very, very clear measure. And then anecdotally, you get comments like, I was offered more money to go to another client, but I didn't want to because I love working here so much. We also had one example from that company where somebody did leave, enticed away with a lovely, a big salary increase. And they came back and said, you just don't know what you've got until you don't have it anymore. So yes, it is measurable, but to begin with, it is a leap of faith. And yeah, you're 100%. And it's not just those measurables, it's just your general reputation. People will flock to companies that have got a good reputation, as being a good place to work. So the client I mentioned, who were number 11 in the top 100 companies to work for, they had by far the longest queues at the recruitment fairs because people had heard they will treat you well, they'll look after you, they value their staff, they give you the best training, all these great things. So yeah, you're right. That was a long way of answering your question, that it's good for a business.
So I'm not gonna ask you to give away all the secrets in this podcast interview, but for business owners that are watching or listening, and are thinking, why do people leave, and what do I need to do to get them to stay? What would be like your top tip for staff retention?
Yes, well, that's a really good question, and there's actually a lot of research being done on it. So to put that in context, Gallup carried out, they do an employee survey every year, a global employee survey, and they interview around 2 million people. And in 2023, they discovered that 55% of employees are what you call quiet quitters, i.e. they're engaged, they're doing their work, they're not giving out any vibes that there's a problem, so everything seems rosy in the garden to their managers. Unfortunately, it's 73% in Europe and 79% in the US, North America, who are quietly quitting. So why is that? And this is just to give some evidence to your question. Mainly, they don't feel that they're being listened to. And I think that's the starting point. And interestingly, in the top 100 companies to work for publication, when I was working with this client I mentioned, they had a 2-page spread on listening. And what they found was that the companies that had the highest score on listening were all in the top 10 companies to work for in the UK. So to me, listening, we don't know what to fix if we don't know what it is. So listening is the starting point. And you can do that through all types of means. For example, you can do a survey. You can run focus groups, which I recommend are done by an external person such as us, and because people are more likely to be open. But the most important thing is you have to act on the feedback, and more importantly, accept it graciously. So one of the things we as coaches have to do is coach people through not just giving feedback, but receiving feedback as well, because it's giving us an opportunity. And I think this horrific quiet quitting statistic, which by the way costs the global economy an unbelievable $8.8 trillion a year, which is 9% of global GDP. So make no mistake about it, this is probably the best opportunity to improve the economy by really getting this leadership piece right. And it starts with listening. It always starts with listening, because none of us have an intention of going into the workplace and demotivating our people. None of us. No. And I've asked that question of many thousands of managers around the world when we're going through the feedback. Raise your hands if you get up in the morning with the intention of upsetting your people. And of course, nobody puts their hand up ever. And I say, so who's causing all this dissatisfaction and low morale? Because it wasn't the people in the previous group. It probably won't be the people in the next group. So what that says to me is people have good intentions. We just simply aren't aware. And you unlock that awareness by really giving people the opportunity to give feedback and to listen to that. So,
Brilliant.
excuse me.
Yeah, no. So,
Excuse me.
I'm wondering now then, how did you get into this? How did you end up, how did your career take you to being your own boss and coaching leadership?
Well, I think like many of us who run our own business, it was quite a sort of meandering path to get here. So I was brought up in a sort of typically a traditional family where you go to school, you get qualifications, you go to university, you get a real job. So my dad was a doctor and my mother was a university lecturer. And I never felt like I fitted in. I wasn't good at the subjects that my dad thought were important, such as physics and chemistry and maths. And even the subjects that I was good at, such as music, art, languages, particularly in the situation of music and art, his view was they're fine for hobbies, but you'll never be a virtuoso, you'll never be a Picasso. So even the things I was good at, I wasn't good enough at, and I certainly wasn't good at the things that he thought were important. So my story growing up was you're not good enough. And so I did sort of drift a bit. I dropped out of university. I studied education, and I dropped out of that because I was too lacking in confidence to handle teenagers in a classroom. They ate me alive. And so I basically drifted into sales jobs and discovered I was actually very good at selling. And I think I should probably step back a second here because I did a lot of work in holidays and weekends in hospitality. So a huge amount of waitressing in all kinds of restaurants and hotels, including a 5-star hotel in Berlochie Castle. And I think hospitality gives you one of the best life trainings ever in terms of reading people, in terms of relationships, knowing when to be discreet, knowing when to be conversational, and so on, and also experiencing how people treat you if you're just a waitress. And I remember then, and I did lots of menial jobs as a student and so on, and I remember then thinking, my goodness, there are people that go through their whole lives being treated as if they're not important. And I kind of felt then, I know I'm destined to do something that changes that. So I drifted through my sales jobs and really enjoyed it. Turned out I was quite good at it. As that career, I was in sales for about 12 years, and I obviously had to train people in sales techniques, obviously because there's a lot of pressure on deliverables there and targets. And when I had my first child, I thought, what am I going to do now? Because obviously childcare, I was the breadwinner. Childcare, and that's another story for a different podcast. But childcare is very expensive, as you know. And I think if you're the sole earner, you can either afford childcare or you can afford a mortgage and all the living expenses. So I had to figure out, what do I do that covers both of those things? And it just so happened I went on a really good course with what was Aberdeen Enterprise Trust at the time, is now evolved into Gateway, Business Gateway. And I did this free course to figure out how I could set up my own business. And it turned out that the person who was teaching selling on that course was leaving. So I approached the training manager and I said, just for your interest, my background is sales and I had to do quite a lot of training as part of my career. And she said, well, would you come and do a presentation for us? So I felt sick for about a week before the presentation. And it went really, really well. I did a 20-minute presentation on how to gain an appointment with a decision maker. And that went well. So it was the most perfect situation for me, Brenda, because I was more or less a single parent. As I say, that's another story. But it meant that I only had to afford childcare when I was physically running my sales courses. And then I could do all my preparation and working on the business around my baby. And that just grew very quickly. I started working with the Chamber of Commerce. Through that, I started getting connections. And within a year, I had a national contract working with an organisation, an IT company around the country on customer care. And through that, I learned probably my biggest life lesson, that you can't deliver great service excellence with a demotivated workforce. And I knew that the missing piece was leadership.
Yeah.
And by pure luck, like I think the universe was looking after me. A company in London who specialised in leadership made a throwaway comment to a management consultant who was working with this company, saying, "I don't suppose you know anyone based in Aberdeen that specialises in service excellence." And she said, "Well, funnily enough, the person who's running our customer care and service excellence program is from Aberdeen." So they came and watched me training. They loved what I did. They asked me to shadow them on a leadership program, which was, so they take a top-down approach to service excellence for exactly the reasons I've explained, where they would work with the leadership team first to create a great culture, and then we would work with the employees. Anyway, that quickly turned into a global rollout, and I worked with the most incredible organizational development specialist who was working with this huge organization. I'm happy to mention her. Her name was Sue Brightman. Look her up on LinkedIn. She's still to this day my biggest inspiration for my career. And she mentored me, and I learned so much about leadership and leadership development from her. And then it just became my passion. Leadership just became my passion. So I think going back there, that was about 1998 that I worked on this huge global program, and it just went from there. And the phone started ringing, and so I've been very fortunate. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked very, very hard, but I've also been very fortunate in the contacts I've made and the support I've been given, and the number of books I've read, and those great authors and great books that are out there as well.
So you've already answered one of my questions, was who's been your biggest supporter or who's been your biggest inspiration. So yeah, you've talked about her, but then yeah, the books. What's been, if some, you could recommend 2 books to somebody listening to get the best understanding of what they need to do to get the right leadership within their organization,
Yeah.
which 2 books would it be?
Well, I think there are so many books out there that are great. And first of all, we have to work on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can't serve people well if we're not the best version of ourselves. So there are lots of books out there. I love The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you with your discipline and these incremental behaviors that take you to the best version of yourself. A similar one called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Gosh, my mind's, there's a myriad of books floating in front of my eyes. In terms of leadership books, John Maxwell is excellent. A very, very good teamwork book by a guy called Nick Fewings, called Team Lead Succeed, is very, very good for people who are leading teams. And I've met him personally, we've chatted online, and he's a very, very dynamic, high energy, super guy. So yeah, those are quite good ones. Gosh, yes. I mean, and once you start searching these books, you'll get all these other recommendations. If any more pop into my head before the end of this podcast, I'll mention them. But yes, I would say to anyone who's leading people or just wants to be the best version themselves as entrepreneurs, as parents, I would say start with the books that help you become the best version of yourself, first and
That's
foremost.
interesting, really interesting, because I asked you about leadership and you started off with yourself. And I had a long drive yesterday, so I'm re-listening to Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's my my favorite personal improvement one as well. So yeah.
Well, and interestingly enough, there are books that are actually very old now that are still as current today as they ever were, because again, the principles of leadership are the same. So Dale Carnegie, for example, The Leader in You, I mean, that was written, I think it must have been, gosh, back in the 60s, possibly. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is as relevant today as it ever was. And also Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence, also outstanding. And again, these are books going back decades that are still as relevant now as they are today. So yeah, I just recommend, I think leaders are readers. And I should say as well, you don't have to have a title of leader. You don't have to be a supervisor or a manager to be a great leader. It's my belief that leaders are people that influence and inspire, and people just want to be around because they make you feel your best. And there's a saying that I'm sure you've heard that say you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're spending your time around great people and inspiring people, whether they're managers or otherwise, it's going to help you be the best that you can be. So whether you're a chief executive or a mum or a dad or a corner shop owner, the same principles all apply. People need to be made to feel that they're important, that they contribute and that they matter. So
I love it. I love it. And leaders are leaders.
Leaders, yes, for sure.
Yeah. So in terms of running your own business then, Margaret, what have been the challenges that you've faced? Because you've been doing that for a long time now. So what have been the difficult times?
Well, as you probably know, a lot of us do sort of personality profiling, Myers-Briggs, Belbin, all these things. And all the ones on admin type detaily stuff, I score virtually 0. So I love what I do. But in terms of working on the business, all the admin, technology, finance are absolutely my Achilles heels. So those have been my biggest challenges. So in the first 3 years when I was just getting started back in the early 90s, my big challenge was obviously to keep, in those days it was actually physical bookkeeping and ledgers. I had to do that for 3 years and I hated it with a passion I can't even put into words. So when I was able to afford to farm all that out, it was just like having the mountains lifted off my shoulders. So that's been a great challenge. I also took a 4-year hiatus to fulfill a childhood ambition of going to art school.
Good, yes.
Yeah, I did. And I loved that. And actually, it's not completely disconnected because all of it's about right brain thinking and creativity. In both cases, whether you're starting on a science project or creating a new leadership program or doing a painting, you're starting with a blank canvas and having to think creatively. So, of course, the timing is everything. And I graduated during lockdown and came back into my business in the world of, online, the online world. And of course, technology is not my greatest strength either. So it's been a steep learning curve in a very different world where businesses are very, very cost conscious and possibly don't see the full value or the full return on investment of good quality coaching and training. And there are lots of people out there who really can make a difference to the business. But cutbacks, cost of living crisis, etc. So I think that's a challenge we're all facing. And I think it makes it more important than ever now to build good relationships because there's no doubt that people deal with people that they know, like, and trust. That's a fact as well. So it's building those, being likable, being trustworthy to get through the challenges of today and remote working. Yeah, I would say that's definitely a challenge for all of us,
Yeah,
including our clients.
I'm the same as you. I'm very people focused, and the detail and the admin was it's not my friend. So yeah, that was the first thing I did. Also, was to find someone for whom that side of the business excites them, and let them do what they enjoy, and I'll continue to do what I enjoy. So I think that's a very powerful message to anyone who's starting up, that you don't have to do it all yourself.
Exactly. And I heard a great little story from one of my business partners, Laura Caven. We did a women in leadership event last week, and we were talking about exactly this. Play to her strengths, work in your zone of genius. And she knows people that say, give me that big bag of crumpled up receipts. I love them. And I think, oh my goodness, how could you possibly love, not it's bad enough doing your own, never mind somebody else's. And they said, well, I couldn't get up in front of a room of people and speak. So yes, 100% play to our strengths, and wherever possible, delegate those things to people that are great at the things that we are not great at. Yeah. So
did you say 1:30 or 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
That's fine. Yes, I'll continue chatting then. I would just got it in my head. Oh my goodness, we're almost right out of time. That's fine. Yeah, so that's the tough part. What have been the highs? What's been the best part of being your own boss?
Oh gosh, there's many. I remember when I did my very, very first ever training for Aberdeen Enterprise Trust back in 1991. I was feeling sick literally for a whole week running up to that. And in fact, I was in the bathroom before we started gagging. I thought I was going to actually throw up. I had a huge imposter syndrome and I was willing it to be cancelled. Of course, it wasn't. And I went into the room and went through, and it was almost like an out of body experience. I felt like I was floating above the room thinking, is that really me appearing to be all confident? And I got great feedback. And I was on an absolute, I was also worn out. There was only a half day. It took me 2 days to recover. I was so drained from the mental energy of pulling off this first course, but I was so high. I got such great feedback and the confidence boost was immense. So that was the first high. I think also when I got my first international job and I was going off to Houston, and it was quite surreal actually. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Houston. Yes, it was Houston was the first one. And I remember sitting in the departure lounge and they're saying, flight number such and such to Houston is now boarding. I remember I've even got goosebumps remembering it, thinking, my goodness, I'm going to go and work in the United States. And they value me enough to fly me over to do that. And similarly to Australia, working with top leaders there. And it was almost like, it was surreal. It was almost like if I'd had a crystal ball when I was in the run up to that very first thing at Aberdeen Enterprise Trust with 12 people, and seen myself working with executive leaders and running big events on stage with hundreds of people, and I thought there's absolutely no way, not in a million years could I ever do that. And again, I would just say to everybody, you have more potential than you can ever know. It's a case of feel the fear and do it anyway. And another great quote by, I think it was Conrad Hilton, founder of the Hilton Hotel Group. He said, nobody ever got successful by parking themselves comfortably in an easy chair. So success begins at the end of our comfort zone. So we have to get uncomfortable to become comfortable later. So yes, and I think some of the biggest highs really, the privilege of international travel and being able to work in different cultures in every continent of the world, and work with the most amazing people and know that we all really want the same things. Our cultures, we want to bring up our families. It's a real privilege to be exposed to these cultures. But I've also got faces floating in front of me now of people who had been regarded as toxic managers, having a very bad effect on people. People were leaving, people were breaking down in tears. And working with them on very robust 360-degree coaching and literally unlocking this awareness where the transformation was literally 180 degrees. They just didn't know. And what I often find with people like that, they're very, very intelligent. They have very high IQs, but maybe the EQ piece is missing. And once you help them to really see, and because they're so intelligent, they get frustrated easily and impatient easily. And that manifests itself in quite authoritarian, critical kind of behavior, and which they feel totally justified in because people aren't coming up to scratch. And once you can unlock that awareness, the transformation is radical and it's sustained. And those have definitely been highlights because you've not just made a difference for that person, but for all the people that are around about them. And I've even heard people say, I'm even happier at home now. I'm not such an angry man. And there's usually been men in that situation. I'm not such an angry person anymore. My wife is really enjoying it. So those really are highlights. Those are probably the hardest work, but they definitely deliver the most rewarding return for sure. So yes, it's been 30 years. Yeah, 30 years. There's been so many highlights over these 30 years. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to take you back to that the feeling sick before your first gig in front of 12 people, and then being flown across the world for big events. I think your horizon moves, doesn't it?
Yes.
But you couldn't have imagined yourself doing that. But as you keep moving, there's a different goal and a different progression. And I guess we as coaches, we help our clients to do that as well, don't we?
I think that's a really great point, actually, because, you know, when I jump away into the future like that, people can't relate to it. I couldn't have related to it either. But I heard I think probably one of the most, I love quotes, by the way. I know some people think they're a wee bit naff, but I love quotes. And one of the first quotes that probably had one of the most profound effects on me was a way back when I started looking at time management. And I came across this quote by a chap called Émile Coué, who was a French pharmacist and French philosopher. And he had a quote up beside his shaving mirror, and it said, "Every day and in every way, I'm getting better and better." So every day he was working a little bit on his personal fitness. Every day he was working a little bit on his nutrition. Every day he was working a little bit on, I don't know, having uncomfortable conversations. And I think the more you start to open up, the more you realize how far you can still go, and, you know, how we've only just started. So yes, totally. And it's the same with if you're working on a leadership coaching program, you don't go in on day one, deliver a session, and suddenly they're at number one in the top 100 companies to work for. There's incremental changes on a day-to-day basis. So what can you do today to be a little bit of a better leader? And I just love that quote. I think if people go away with nothing else from this podcast, think about that quote. Every day and in every way, I'm getting better and better. And oh my goodness, for sure, I'm work in progress. At this great age in life, I'm still work in progress every day. I'm trying to work on myself. And, you know, let's not beat ourselves up. None of us is ever going to be perfect. I get things wrong just as much as anybody else. But one thing I do now is I reflect on, you know, what I've done or said that day. And could I have inadvertently and unintentionally have said something that didn't land well with people? So I think that's another side of being a coach, that you're more aware of your own style. And I probably talk too much, as I did at the beginning of this podcast, not taking room to breathe.
You're here to talk. That's the whole point of a podcast. So no, it's good. And I've heard that quote, but I didn't know who it was. So thank you for that. I'm just wondering. These are questions that I wasn't prepared at all at the way the conversation's going. But I'm just thinking about the people that we work with. Do you believe that some people are not coachable?
Yes, I do. And there are not many. I've mentioned that the so-called toxic managers earlier, who turned out they're just very unaware. I think there's and it's a minority of people who it's all about them. They're self-serving, narcissistic, power hungry. I'm sure we could think of many in the public eye that fall into that category. And I think you can tell quite quickly if they don't have the values. And I actually walked away from 2 quite lucrative programs a number of years ago because I knew the sponsor was ticking a box. You know, well, we know we've got to do leadership. So, but I could just tell. And I think maybe we're drawn to coaching because we're wired in a certain way. But I really trust my gut. And I just think I know if I work with this person, nothing is going to change. And it's not fair to the employees or the people that work around that person to set an expectation when you just know that that person is not going to do anything with it. So, and I won't work with somebody like that. But
and I guess that would also affect your reputation, because you could say, yeah, we worked with Margaret, nothing happened.
We brought her in and nothing changed. Yes, but it's back to listening. It's a two-way process. You know, I start off by listening to what their challenges are, and then, you know, we like to think that we're brought in because we've expertise that they don't have. So it's important that they listen to the advice that we are helping them with. And you can tell quite quickly, I'm sure you're the same, Brenda, you can tell quite quickly if someone's not coachable. But I think most people are. But there's certain, and unfortunately, the ones that aren't, I've always found that the people that least think they need coaching are always the ones that most do. And even if they're a small number, they do the most damage as well, because they're
Yeah.
often in positions of power. So, yeah. And I'm not quite sure how we overcome that challenge, but I think I also feel it depends where someone is in an organization. But if they're not the person at the very, very top, first of all, the person at the top must hold that person accountable. This is not opt-in. This is how we work. We've got our values on the wall. We work by those values. They're not just a poster campaign, although that's how they've been perceived. So this is not opt-in. We have to work by those values and demonstrate that we mean them. And what I've found sometimes is some people, and again, it's a minority, just don't want to do it. They just don't want to be nice to people. They want to do their thing. They want to do their technical thing. And quite often what happens is peer pressure, just eventually they think this is not the place for me, and of their own accord, they move on. And I've seen that happen 2 or 3 times. And it's the right thing. You know, if they're not the right fit for the organization and vice versa, yeah, they make the right decision in that situation.
So I think turning that into a piece of advice for a business owner that's listening or watching is trust your gut and stand firm to your values. Yes.
Yes,
And
and
hire
hold
people that fit that.
100%. They could have the best technical CV in the world, but if they have an attitude that's disruptive or this superiority complex where they look down on other people, or just any behaviors that great, don't underestimate the damage that can do to your whole team. And consequently, the bottom line, but people, I left a company once because of a toxic person that the manager wasn't managing. So yes, I think more so now than ever, we should be employing people who have the right values as well as their technical ability.
Yeah. Oh, we're so much on the same page, Margaret. It's brilliant.
Yes.
Really good.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I've started up this podcast. It's been going for a wee while now, actually, with the intention of showing women that we can and should start and scale businesses, to the same extent as men. But still, the numbers are not there. There's not as many women, female entrepreneurs as there are men. What do you think that we can do to support other women in business?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I mentioned that we ran an event last week called CEO. We did the pilot. My partner, Laura Caven, is a multi-certified award-winning coach. And we launched this together in Glasgow. And we covered various subjects, but the overwhelming feedback was that they wanted more of each subject. So we've created a 4-module program. So the first one last week was about vision. So CEO Summit Vision, it was called. And we looked at things like our own individual leadership styles. And again, you don't have to be a manager to be a great leader. We talked about the power of visualization, setting boundaries, asserting ourselves around those boundaries. And the vibe in the room was just amazing. And they were all saying, because we talked about gender disparity and what causes that. We are often still the nurturers. We're still the main care providers for children and elderly parents. And so we're always juggling. And the overwhelming feedback was, we need more of this. We need more women round about us understanding the challenges we're facing and all the hormonal ups and downs as well. So I've gone off track with your first question, was how do we support women?
Yeah.
So there are things like that. And Laura and I plan to make this into a community. So we've got a Facebook page for people that have attended the event. But I think also just doing all we can to call people out, for example, who make throwaway comments that undermine women. And again, it's not usually done with malice. It's usually done in a kind of, it's just so ingrained in our traditional backgrounds that, and it can work both ways actually, that we just draw attention to this disparity. So I've heard women quite often, or feel quite often saying to a woman, "Oh, you've got him well trained," if she happens to have a supportive partner. And I think, well, no, he's maybe just a guy who actually does get it that we're equal in this relationship. So I think just calling people out when they say, "Oh, you take the minutes, Margaret," because I happen to be the only woman in the room. Well, with my going back to my Achilles heel of being very bad on detail, I'm the worst person to take the minutes. A, they're not legible. B, there's arrows going all over the place and stars, and so I would just say, no, that is not my strength. And by the way, why are you asking me to do it? And as I say, I don't think it's malice. I just think we need to keep calling people out when they make these generalistic comments that put us in a pigeonhole of that's a woman's job. And it's getting better. I think the awareness is definitely getting better. And by the way, I am being general. I've worked with some fantastic men leaders, and I've also worked with some women leaders that are not very good. But on the whole, a recent survey I think it was by McKinsey, they analysed the 360 feedback of a whole number of C-suite women leaders, and on 17 out of 19 of the criteria, women outperformed the men. 17 out of 19. And yet there's only like 30% of women in C-suite positions. So sorry, I interrupted you, Brenda.
No, that's okay. I'm just thinking, wow, so now that we're aware of that, we can have better performing teams because we're bringing in better leaders, because we're aware that, statistically, women are better leaders.
Yeah, in many respects, and I do think because we are naturally more again, I'm being general. We're more nurturing, we're more compassionate, we're more empathetic, we're more likely to notice if someone's being spoken over in a meeting and what's your point, are we missing good information here? And again, I'm being very general. And I think a balance of the male female particularly in leadership positions is absolutely essential, because yes, we are better in general on many respects than men. But again, this is no disrespect. I've got some fantastic, male colleagues, male clients, men that I just know who are really fantastic, but they're maybe just missing that piece where they need the sort of female to kind of mesh so that the two strengths are brought together. So strength and drive combined with empathy and compassion and communication skills and stuff, then you've got
and overcoming that unconscious bias that we've got.
Exactly.
The old cultural norm is that what we are, the gender roles, if you like. So
yes, exactly. And I can think of people in the public eye, and they will normally be politicians. I'll never mention names of politicians in a public sphere, because people can be so entrenched in one side or the other. If you mention a politician that you happen to admire because of their values, you could lose them. But I am thinking of people in that realm who I think are outstanding leaders, who are in it to do things for the greater good, rather than for their own power. And I'm equally thinking of people that you can tell are in it for their own power. But I won't think. But again, I am thinking of one particular male global leader who definitely had all those skills that we were talking about as well, and hugely respects women as complete equals. Yeah. I'm sure some people will figure out who I'm thinking about, but and by the way, I'm apolitical for that very reason.
Yeah, let's not get into the politics. I know exactly who you're talking about, and his successor was very different.
But yes, I mean, and I'm apolitical for that very reason. I'm all about leader, not party, because in every situation, the culture comes from the top down. The person at the top determines the culture. Yeah. So, yeah.
Margaret, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your insight into leadership, but also sharing your own story and your own experiences as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with a kindred spirit. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and join our Facebook community at Scale Her Up. Please connect with me, Brenda Hector, on social media and drop me a message to let me know how you're enjoying the podcasts, or even better, pop up a review. I'll finish by reminding you that only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female, and men are 5 times more likely to scale their business to over 1 million in turnover than women are. If we started and scaled our businesses to the same extent as men, it would add £250 billion to the UK economy and provide millions of jobs. Ladies, you can do it and make a massive difference.